increases in gas, electric, and also an administrative fee in water and water pollution control in a couple of those scenarios. So I just want you to know that we have made that part of the discussion. We haven't really engaged in a conversation. I don't believe that today's the day to do that, but I just wanted to point it out that it was there. I think it's also important to note that that 2014 budget with the $5.65 million deficit that we're trying to address incorporated a couple of things that we need to get direction from you on. Number one is we had initially talked about increasing all salaries throughout the city as part of our human resource objectives. One of the decisions that was made to help us balance the budget is we removed any pay increases, a cost of living increase for non-union employees, and that totals about $1.6 million. So generally, if you're a union employee, you will get your contractual pay increase. For non-union employees, it was removed, and that's a price tag of about $1.6 million. I think that's a critical item that we need to discuss. And if a determination is made that we don't believe that that's the best route to go, we would have to identify additional cuts or additional mill levy increases to raise that. And then the last item that I want to talk about regarding this is we have an item called smoothing of retirement reserve contributions. Based on the analysis of where we stand from the retirement perspective, we wanted to bond 3 years of contributions to smooth it up because there's some higher expense. It's really a cash flow management item, and it's certainly to our benefit, but there's a lot of expenditures that are projected during the first year and lesser in the further years, so it just allowed us to manage the cash flow. But all that being said, I wanted to bring that to your attention so that nobody is taken by surprise on any of that. And the last thing that I will say for that, the objective as we go through the departmental discussions is that we really try to resolve as many of these as we can when we're dealing it. Today we're going to have the opportunity to listen to Public Works and their various divisions. There are scenarios that are outlined as cost-saving measures. We would like to end the day with each department to say, we support that as a cut, or we don't support that as a cut, and then we have to discuss, are we talking about increasing the mill levy, or are we talking about some other alternative? What we would like to do, and I think when I say we, I mean all of us in the conversations that we've had, is to avoid a last-minute long night, which we'll probably have anyways, but that we're all trying to remember all the conversations and all the decisions that we had. So it's staff objective that as you all provide direction on each of these items, that we will continue to update the tally sheet and then be able to provide you a status report. In that regard, the last thing I'll say on that is that we will bring police and fire back probably a week from today, just to make sure that we talk thoroughly about what enhancements that they need. We talked about code, we talked about cars and some other things, fire talked about some issues. We want to make sure that we have a thorough conversation about that and we'll receive direction from you as to how to address that. So that concludes my opening comments regarding the budget approval process.
Thank you, City Manager. And I know we've talked, and I know you want us to go through, and I know you want us to cut and in a perfect world, that would be perfect. I just don't know how we're gonna do that with a lot of unanswered questions yet. But we'll surely shoot for that, Jim. I think it would be nice if we could do that, but I think yourself and staff has done a wonderful job on providing things that are broken down to us, that are explained very well. So I know in my studying, it's been very, very helpful. So I appreciate what you're trying to do, having us there the 11th hour. So.
And thank you, Deputy Mayor. And we know that this is tough. This is probably one of the toughest things from a city management perspective that we've gone through, because these are very significant issues that need to be addressed. And I did have a note here, how much information is enough. We know that you're going to have a lot of questions, and we're asking you, especially if this is one of your initial budget processes, ask the question.
Right.
We may not have the answer but it's absolutely vital that we know it early so we can get back to you. And I know that we provided a lot of information to
Right.
you. And as we go through this week, we'll be following up with you to make sure that that's helpful. If I could, before we turn it over to Public Works, I'd like to introduce Ariel for those who don't know her. And she was named before the person in the movie.
Was named before The Little Mermaid.
Okay.
So we're all good.
So that showed my cultural knowledge. And, but Ariel could explain some of the packets of information that you can provide it to and how those impact today, so.
I tried to catch most of you as you were coming in, but I just wanted to quickly go over what is in front of you. So you guys are gonna see a packet like this on top of the actual vanilla envelope packet. And the packet on top is the answers to your questions so far, as well as an overview sheet of what's inside the vanilla packet and within inside the white packet with all of the questions. So it kind of just is an overview sheet. But inside the actual vanilla packet, we have replaced out the department sheets and added at the bottom of each of the department sheets where the expenditure reductions for that particular department are. So that way you don't have to flip back and forth. And so if you pull them out of the vanilla packet, they're all numbered and you can replace them in your sheet. Since we are gonna get started today, maybe it would be best to just replace, you know, the Public Works, the planning, the zoo, and the H&D for today, and then replace the other ones later, just to make sure you guys have plenty of time to make sure you're putting it in the right place. But besides that, the packet has the questions that are in it. We had the expenditure forms that are there that are reduced, that are not reduced, the expenditure forms there. And a summary of alternatives. We had one change.
Hold on just a second. I'm gonna acknowledge Karen first. She had her hand up.
We may have the same question. We got a packet that looks like this on Tuesday. There were updates already in the back with the suggestions of the cuts. There's a section in the back. Then we got a handout like this on Tuesday. We got another one just like it, just now apparently. Now, you're talking about the sections that you have split out to go in each section. Are those all the same?
Let me comment. Yes. The only, I gave that to you for two reasons. Number one is I just wanted to make sure that everybody had it. We handed it on Tuesday and.
Okay, can we slow down just a
Yeah.
second? Are you you're talking about this one, Karen? Everybody has that one. This is what we had Tuesday, and this is what the city manager wanted us to look at and,
Well, they just sent another set
well,
around.
hold on. That's what the city manager gave us on Tuesday. That's one set, right?
Correct.
Okay, the next set that, Ariel, is that right? Mm-hmm. That you're talking about is this set, right?
Yep, and the packet that was on top of that. But I
Okay,
would,
what packet was on top of that? Can you
This was on top.
What is this?
nope, it's like this. It looks like this. It
Yeah.
says supplement number 2 up at the top. That's
Okay.
the one that I was referring to.
Okay, so everybody have that one?
I think you're calling them both packets, which is confusing.
I forgot about the line item packet that he just passed out, so.
Okay, so it says recommended budget supplement number 2. Does everybody have that one? Everybody have that one? Okay, and then the one that you want us, this one starts with executive department with page number 34.
Exactly. Just pull out those department pages out of your book and replace the same pages with those new ones.
Okay, all right, is everybody on the same page? Huh,
Deputy Mayor?
Okay.
My question was, are all, the chapter that we already had, the two identical handouts from Tuesday and today, and then the split ones that you're giving us, all exactly the same thing?
There's one alteration which is listed on that one sheet, which is that we did make a change to the legal department's summary of alternatives. And so that's listed in there, and instead of it being, I think it was 71,000, it's now at 150,000, 50,000 of which is a reduction to the special liability fund and 100,000 reduction to the general fund.
okay.
But that's the only alteration, and that is listed on that sheet and updated.
Thank you. If I can follow up with just one thing. We ended up with some information, duplication and changes that looked similar last year as well. If you could date these every time they come out, it would help so much. Thank you.
And thank you, Karen. Like revised and then today's date or color code, just, give us a different color code on the front sheet, that would be great. Because I'm not gonna sit here and insert mine, and trust me, when I get home, I'll be calling Jenny to ask her what the heck we talked about. Mr. Mayor, did you have
No,
anything?
I think that was it. I mean, go very slowly when you explain this, because when we get new information here, it's very, like you just said, the legal. Now, is that in this packet or this one that referred to the change in the legal?
The change in legal is actually, it's within that packet. And it's in both. It's reflected in both.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
Deputy Mayor,
Yes, City Manager.
Council, thank you. What I would like to recommend is that whenever possible, and we will make it happen,
Okay.
is we will run everything through Ginny from this point forward.
No, and that's not necessary, Jim. Jim, that's not necessary. What's necessary is that we're all on the same page, whether she highlights it in blue or color codes it or something, you don't have to do that. You don't have to do that. I think sometimes that's a waste of time and you don't have time to do that. So just as long as we're all on the same page, okay?
Our commitment will to make this as easy as possible, so
Yeah.
there's no confusion up here.
Yeah, we're, you know, Ariel, me and the mayor, I think I can speak for him, we're kind of elderly, so we're kind of slow at this, so we can. We kind of need a little, and it's Saturday, the only day I get to sleep in, so. Okay, city manager, let's go.
All right, thank you very much. A good start to the meeting, good information. At this point, I'd like to initiate the departmental presentations, and the majority of the day is going to be spent with the Public Works Department. Most of you, well, Doug Whitaker is the Public Works Director, and he will initiate his presentation.
Thank you. Good morning,
Good morning.
council. Want to go through Public Works. The page that I'm starting on is page 108.
Hey, there we go, 108, how about that?
Should be Public Works Department at the top. Just kind of a format that I would like to use. I'm going to try to talk through the budget. Obviously, I've only been here a short time, so I don't know all the details, so you will see my staff rotate as we go through each one, so just, they will come up and be here to try to help answer questions. Just as a highlight to start on Public Works really has three major functions. First is we operate and maintain the city's infrastructure. Two, we play an important role in protecting the public's health and safety. And then lastly, we work in the department coordinates development through the facility planning efforts and ensures environmental compliance and the construction, et cetera, of new subdivisions and from that standpoint, roads, bridges, water mains, and sewer lines. The total budget, as you see there, and I hope is 108, everybody got that page? We're looking at the 102 million total
Yeah.
page. Okay, I want to make sure.
If I may, there is, you do need to insert 108, the new 108 out of your packet. Because I'm sure you'll be referring to this and not what's in the book. Okay. Is everybody okay with that? Okay. Elaine, you good? Okay.
So is this replacing the entire section?
That's what it looks like.
Yeah, 108 through 10. Correct.
Yes.
Okay, proceed, please.
Okay. As we start out, the total budget is 102 million, there 419,000. The total FTEs, the 383 and a half. Of that, the funding source breakdown, I wanted to just quickly go through. General fund is 7.8 million. You see the different numbers. I'm not going to read each one, but of our total budget, 7.6% of it comes from the general fund. And then, of course, the other funding sources are the special street tax, which is the half-cent city, half-cent sales tax, motor fuel taxes, the internal service funds, and then the enterprise funds, which are utilities and parking, the fees that we get from there. And now what I'll do is I'll start there at the bottom of page 108, and I'll just kind of go through a section, and I'll finish it. Then if there's questions before we flip to another one, feel free to, just jump in and ask me questions at any time, but I want to try to keep it moving, for time reasons for everybody. First area is Public Works Administration, and TSG is the Technical Services Group, which handles all of the GIS and the maintenance management system for Public Works. That division the costs for TSG are spread through the internal, I believe it's an internal service fund across Public Works. Is that, am I understanding it right, Pam? It's fine.
Basically, the costs of TSG are spread out against parking, utilities, and others for the services they provide to those departments.
Thank you.
And we provide the support for all of the divisions within Public Works. The budget there shows 619,000 and 8 FTEs. Again, 2 of those are administration, and then 6 are with the TSG organization that provide the mapping and the scanning and the city support for City Works, which is the city management system. So that basically is the administration portion. There wasn't any real identified cuts in that group. There's really, from that standpoint, so I didn't bring any up there. Is there any questions on that one before we go to page 109?
Is there any questions, comments? Proceed.
Clarification?
Okay.
Sure.
Karen?
When you say internal service fund there, that is where other departments are paying into your department in the revenue?
It doesn't go in the revenue. What happens is the expense is reallocated out to the other departments depending on the amount of time that they provide services to them.
Thank you.
So the revenue doesn't come in, the expenses go out.
Can you give me an example?
Well, on paper it does, right?
On paper, it does.
Okay.
All the expenses are first recorded into the general fund. And then there's an allocation method that Public Works has that then sends those expenses out to water.
Okay.
So if they're helping water with GIS projects or City Works implementation, then those expenses are sent to water, and they pay those expenses.
Okay, thank you.
Then we'll go on to page 109 and start with development services. That's why Miriam's up here. This group provides, one-stop permit center, which is designed to speed the building permit process. So they review the plans, issue the permits, then do the inspections, and then also handle the licensing for all of the contractors within the city. So any contractor that works out there gets their license through development services. They have a total there, FTEs of 15, and the $1.36 million budget. Of that, I'd like to point out that we show in 2012, go ahead, Miriam, explain that we actually generate revenue. There is revenue that comes in, so maybe.
Yeah, our revenues exceeded our expenditures in 2012, and that had been pretty consistent over the years until we had the large economic downturn, but now we're back up to that level again. So in terms of actual expense to the general fund, it's our intent that our users actually pay for the services that are provided. And so we are a general fund agency, but in some, you could consider us somewhat of an enterprise fund in that we typically recoup 100% of what we spend.
So I think to recap, just to recap that if you've eliminated her entire department, you also eliminate basically the revenue that comes in. So there's an offset there, so it wouldn't be a big savings, I guess is what I'm trying to, say from that standpoint. One item we did look, because it is in the general fund and as requested by finance and staff, is looked at, what we could do towards that 5% reduction. And if you look at page 110-2.
Before we continue, Elaine had her hand up, and I don't know if,
No, thank you, Deputy Mayor.
uh-huh.
Doug, this has nothing to do with the water funds, or do we have any reserves in any of these funds that the developers pay for permits and that type of thing? Are there any funds that have any reserves in them? I mean, I know like the schools, they had capital outlay, where they had, lots of money in it. Just as a newbie on the block, I'd really like to know if we have any funds that have reserves in them.
Okay.
The closest we come to what you think of as a reserve would probably be the utility funds. But basically, the general fund's reserve is its fund balance. There's no designated sinking fund or capital equipment improvement fund or anything like that.
So the water fund, the stormwater the stormwater, all of those, or the developers that pay for permits and that type of thing, that all goes into the general fund?
No, the stormwater, the water, the wastewater, they have a separate fund. It doesn't go through general
So
fund.
we're not talking about that yet?
That's
Okay,
correct.
thank you.
Okay, continue on.
Okay. Yeah, if you look at page 110-2 at the top, what we have proposed as a possibility to help towards that reduction is the elimination of one plan reviewer. And it would be the loss of the position would result in, we're just putting the impacts. The loss of that position would result in delayed electrical plan review, which again is for the permit process through there. The expenditure, if we eliminated at FTE, it would be the $69,394 that we could reduce the development services budget portion. And again, that is all funded through the, the general fund. Other than that, we had no other reasonable alternatives, to deliver the service using, we'd have to use existing staff to fill in for what this position would be eliminated.
Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Thank you, Debbie. And just to point out, I believe within the last 2 years, we reviewed the levels of the fees that we charge for permits. Is that correct? And in general, they were raised.
Right,
You want to speak to that?
you had asked specifically how we compare to other municipalities in the Kansas City area, and in terms of fees, and time is always money to developers. So we were actually, I think, second in terms of the fee, our fees and the time we turn around things, and so that was very, very good. So again, if we continue to reduce staff, that may be a problem, but yes, we were ranked second out of about 11 municipalities in terms of the cost of service and the turnaround time.
So I think the point to council members is this is a revenue source. We can increase it to the extent we can, but at the same time to be comparable with other cities in what the fees, as well as that important point is a turnaround point is almost more important, I understand, to the developers than the fee is. They're more concerned in how quickly they get things approved than paying the fee.
That's correct.
That's true. Any more questions, Karen?
If I can ask a question on your proposed cut, but actually to the city manager and the financial administrator, I think just as an example of what we're seeing in this whole set of suggestions, we all know that a salary isn't the only cost of an employee. It's salary plus fringes and other benefits and costs like computer licenses and vehicles and all those things. When we see this particular one, the $69,394, but also all the other ones in that list, are these salary only or are they fully loaded, if you will? Savings.
They include the benefits, so their wages and benefits, but they don't include a car or,
All the other
electric or
expenses.
something like that.
Thank you.
Any more before we head on? Okay, proceed on, please.
Okay. Then we'll move on to the second item there, engineering. Which again, engineering administers all of the public improvement projects, and it inspects the work performed in the public right-of-way, and maintains all the survey data control within the city, and manages the city bridge inspection and maintenance program, which is a requirement through the Federal Highway Administration, and also which is carried down through KDOT. We have total FTEs within engineering are 25. It breaks down into project management is 13 of them, right-of-way and the survey management is 12, and bridge inspection really is there's no FTE there. That's one of the project managers that handles that area for us. Again, it's to manage all of the city projects out there, and projects, of course, are funded through not only the city's half-cent sales tax, but then also, what do we have, the federal fund exchange and the countywide sales tax.
Correct. Developer-type projects and assessment-type projects also.
So that basically is an overview of engineering. Again, we had, if you go to page 110-2 again, yes. We have there at the middle of the page some, again, projecting some savings. One would be the elimination of one engineering tech 1 position. This would be a construction inspector. And again, the construction inspectors out there are the ones that are checking to make sure that as the road construction, curbs, sidewalks, are being put in per plans and specs. That's our set of eyes out there to verify that what we're paying for is, what we should be, we're getting what we're paying for and what was designed. Also, they deal with the utilities, right? Inspection of the utilities.
Correct.
So, utilities that work in our right-of-ways and like that, we inspect that work there, so.
How will that affect us if we take that position away?
It means we would have less eyes out there watching the projects. I mean, they would be spread, we would have to spread the projects out, spread the inspectors, over more projects. Less inspectors, so we'd have to get them out there from that standpoint. And obviously with the half-cent sales tax and those many projects that are out there because of that funding source, there are a lot of projects out there for them to manage.
Michelle?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. In this department, has there been any overtime paid out in the last few years?
During the summer months, we do have overtime with the construction inspection group. Due to the high temperatures during the summer, the contractors wanting to start at maybe 5 o'clock in the morning to get the concrete poured. So we have had generally under $5,000 a year on overtime, but it's generally that type of work.
Thank you.
Elaine?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I know with the state that they have dates that cut off with construction, and if it goes past that date, the company is penalized enormously. Do we have those written into our contracts so that if they aren't done by, that is one of the complaints I've gotten from a lot of constituents, is that they go by and none of the equipment is moving. I know we're ordering stuff and getting it there, but there just seems to be a lot of projects where people drive by and nothing's going on. So I guess my question is, are we putting that into our contracts that if they are not finished by date certain, that they have to pay back so much of that contract?
Our standard contract language on projects does include what's called liquidated damages. There's a table, certain amount of, it's based on the cost of the project, the construction dollar amount. If it's a $1 million project, it's $500 per day, but there are numbers in that contract that will be assessed to the contractor if they go over the days.
Do we have that happen very often?
It occasionally happens, yes.
So are we realistic in the dates that we put that the project should be finished?
We certainly try to be. We try to give the contractor enough time to do the work.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay.
The second reduction we had identified within engineering is on page, at the top of page 110-3. And it's the elimination of, again, it's the same title, one engineering tech position, but this one is working within the city survey crew. And it would mean that we would have obviously less individuals that could go out and do the surveyor, do the surveys, and also possibly lengthen the time, to completion for some of the public infrastructure projects. But that is something we did identify as a possibility of, of a reduction in that group.
Are there any questions about the survey crew member? Okay.
Okay. We'll move to I'm going to move ahead. On the bottom of page 109 is a special street tax. If you'll let me move there, that way I don't have to play so many musical chairs. Again, that budget is the special street tax, and it's, was voter approved. It's the half-cent sales tax to fund all of the street improvement projects and repairing of existing streets, sidewalks, curbs and gutters, and street lights. There's two FTEs there, excuse me, and basically those are the project managers that are managing all of those projects out there in the field. I think just to give you an idea, with the half-cent sales tax and what we're working through right now, this was the original book that came up with those lists based on the Stantec group doing a pavement rating index many years ago. I think it was 2006, 2007. Obviously, streets don't improve with age, so we know that whatever they were rated then, they're not going to be any better at this point in time. However, we do need to we're looking to go back through, let's look at what I would call a risk assessment from the standpoint of, based on current conditions, is the pavement in certain areas, which we know has happened, is failing faster than we anticipated. Is there, maintenance is basically escalated, so therefore we're spending a lot of money on certain roads, maybe we need to move around. And then also the effects on traffic. I mean, if it's, we got lanes shut down all the time because we need to repair that section, maybe that street, needed to be moved around in this overall plan. And again, then things that we're trying to take into consideration on that would be design time, then utility locates, trying to get some, a handle on coordination there, and some of that would address Councilmember Schwartz's question, is that sometimes utilities hold us up, especially the ones that are in the right-of-way. When I say right-of-way, behind the curb, not under the road. Can we get better coordination on that? And then also making sure that we work with our own utilities, water, sewer, stormwater, as far as that if we've got 100-year-old lines under the road, it's probably a good time to look at replacing those also, so that we're not putting brand-new road over the water line to let it blow the new pavement up, within 6 months or so. And then looking at construction time, and then of course the key is traffic disruption to the businesses. So those are some of the key factors we're trying to look at right now to make sure that when we put these projects together moving forward. So that's some of my challenges, and trying to look at that and working with engineering. Other than that, on that fund, obviously it's not general fund. There wasn't any cuts there. I don't have anything else to say on that fund, if there's any questions.
Karen?
Could we go back to engineering overall for a moment? And across the table to the city manager. There are many things about this new book that I like, but something that I miss was we in the past couple of years anyway, would have a 3-year history of how many employees there were in the section and what the budget was, which would give us some perspective on where we were. And I know that all the departments were told not to ask for anything new, so we don't see that this year. But in the past, you all had been asking for additional engineers, yet, of course, we don't see that this year. We had thought that even though there was sort of a bubble because there were so many Parks and Rec projects going on in 2010 or 2011 and 12, let's say, that once those sort of played out, you'd be okay. Could you address the level of engineering that you have right now and your ability to handle the projects that you do have?
Sure. We typically, at any one time, have 60 to 70 projects ongoing. That can be anywhere in the process of planning to designing to construction. So we have quite a heavy workload, and our project engineers don't only administer those projects, but they also do reviews on access to new developments, drainage to new developments, unsafe structures. So our engineers do additional work besides administering these projects. 3 years ago, we did have 2 of our engineers retire, and that reduced our staff by 2 engineers. We really have had a heavy workload with the sales tax projects coming on board. Our project engineers have helped out our project manager for the sales tax program. We try to be a resource, but we do also help manage those when there is a need. I guess in summary, we are busy. We have not seen a decrease in the number of projects, and we are busy. We did not ask for an additional engineering position this year. Could we use one? Yes, we could, but we know the budget's tight, so we are managing.
Well, we want you to be busy.
Yeah, absolutely, and we like being busy.
Thank you. Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, continue on.
Okay. Then back on page 109, let me move to transportation operations if you would, and then I can kind of tie forestry in with some of the other groups. Transportation operations is, first is the traffic operations group, which is general fund, the 2.8 million. There's 13 FTEs. They maintain all of the traffic signals and city-owned streetlights and crosswalks and the school crossings and 50,000 plus street signs. What we do want to point out there is that of that $2.8 million, I think it's another 1.75 of it is paying for the streetlights contract that we have with Westar. So they don't have $2.8 million to go out and maintain all of the streets and signs and light. You know, you gotta take, it's basically about $1 million that they have to go out and maintain all of those, traffic control items, which obviously are there for public safety. You know, meaning traffic lights, crossing signals, the blinkers, all of that. And then maintaining the signs. Plus, they also, this group also does all the striping and everything, correct? So, you know, all the striping on the streets and roads and like that we have to constantly, you know, redo, just because it wears off, et cetera, comes out of that group. Then next, to just look and we'll tie in, the next below it there is transportation operations, which is street maintenance. That is funded solely by the motor fuel tax. And as you know, with cars getting more, or vehicles, I should say, getting more efficient and like that, that fund is kind of in a decline is what we get, is my understanding, correct, Ron? Yes. You know, it's a calculation through the state, you know, where they collect the fuel taxes and then distribute out to the cities. So obviously, it's kind of in a decline, and part of what we had to do to help the general fund in 2013 is 330,000 of the, what I would call commodities, you know, signs and posts and stuff like that we needed for transportation ops has been moved to street maintenance. So street maintenance is buying the materials for traffic operations. And that was to help kind of balance some of that, my understanding was, in 2013 budget.
Hey, thank you. Is there any way for us to purchase those commodities in bulk, say in collaboration with the county or the state or both or other municipalities?
We make every attempt to do that. We purchase a lot of all of our commodities now off of every state contract that we can, our paint, most all those things. We look for the best opportunities to save every penny. Not only do we do that, but we recycle virtually every sign blank that we can, sign post, as we reuse them.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. And on this, I think it's a point to make or to consider. This is the line item area then that we use to repair the streets. Many times we have comments from the residents about what we should or should not be doing or doing more in repairing streets. So this is the only fund we have other than the half-cent sales tax, or to build a new street or some type of development that would be separate. And I know in many cities, there are general funds that are used, this is all from the motor fuel tax we get back from the state. There are many municipalities that put general funds into this also. Is that, I mean, you're familiar with how other municipalities do it, correct?
Yes, where I was before, there was money that came in from general fund plus a half-cent sales tax, and the fuel tax was probably a third of what I had to work with.
So I think, and as we see our streets, this is something we're going to have to be considering at some point, is that the motor fuel tax is not sufficient, or certainly will not be sufficient, to maintain our streets at the level the people want them maintained. So down the road, at some point, we're going to have to look at this, because it just, we can't have it. We can't have our streets repaired based on the motor fuel tax. You know, comment any more to that?
Well, I might add too, and within that 6.3 million, you see, he has to fund his vehicle replacements. So it's not just repairing the streets, the vehicles, and obviously I would have to say in this organization, he has to have vehicles that run because most of his equipment is large, and then of course he also manages the de-icing and snow plowing and all of that. So obviously he's got to have equipment that's operating in order to be out there performing the services that this organization handles. And one thing Ron pointed out to me, he has to work in 3 budget modes. Bad snow year, no snow year, in between snow year, all of that takes his money. And, you know, if he has a bad snow year, he has less to work with, you know, for his maintenance for the year, because again, his fund is, you know, comes in from the motor fuel tax. And obviously a bad snow year also probably increases potholes. The harder weather you have, the worse it does, the harder it is on the streets. So that would be the functions that I would say there for traffic and, transportation.
Do you know that Ron is probably the best mechanic around?
I'd been told he came up through the fleet service.
Do you know that Ron is the best mechanic around?
Oh, okay, yes. Yes.
So he's gonna have some vehicles that can run. Now, when Ron tells me they can't run no more, it's because he can't patch on them. Isn't that right, Ron?
Yeah, we do our best to
You
keep
do your
everything on the
best.
street as long as we can.
He does. So I know that personally, and I know he has patched on a lot of vehicles to keep them out there. So when he says, I need something new, it's gold, so. And the different cycles that he works through, you know that Ron's a mechanic, he's used to that. All right. Yes, Karen?
Quick question to follow up on what you just covered. I know when I came on to the council, that cycle of good snow year, bad snow year was described. And I know that Ron ran fleet before he came here, so he's got both sides of that. The question would be, because we need to be doing future planning as well. As long as this fund is reasonably funded, or this section of your department is reasonably funded, I know that what you've done for a long time is, bad snow year, all the money goes into day-to-day operations. Good snow year, that's when we replaced equipment, in a simple sense. If this section is adequately funded, does that rhythm work pretty well for getting equipment replaced?
It can, unless you go through a terribly long cycle of bad snow years, Karen, and that's happened before. It seems like around here, things goes in 3s or 4s. If it was every other year balancing, it'd work, but when you incur 3 or 4 bad snow years in a row, that makes it terribly difficult. You fall behind, and then you're catching up. So, I guess in a short answer, yes, it works. It's just not a very efficient way sometimes.
Thank you. I just, as we look at this today, I hope we're all got this little sidetrack going of thinking how we want to do this in the future, because we don't want
One thing
what
I-
happened recently to happen again.
One thing I would like to add, that when we get into those years we don't have snow, we don't dedicate all that funding to equipment replacements. We also up concrete, asphalt, and those things out in the street, the things that we do. We increase the number of projects that our crews do out in the street with that extra money too. So we don't, I know it's been said before that that's what we do. We just capture that snow money and it goes all to equipment, and that's not really true. We reallocate it over our whole program.
And if I may, one more along those lines, when we entered into, in 2009, the half-cent sales tax street replacement program, the vehicles were in disrepair, the preventive maintenance had not been done. And so one of the terms that I learned that was kind of new to me was crack sealing, for instance. We hadn't dealt with the joints in the streets, all kinds of streets, and we hadn't been doing that preventive crack sealing. And so that was accelerating the deterioration of what we did have. Starting in 2009, when we started doing the replacement of the streets through half-cent, we all saw that preventive maintenance pick up. How would you say we're doing on that preventive maintenance level right now?
We're behind this year. Weather and some other things have got us behind, but we have, since we changed things in late 2010, 2011, we have doubled our crack sealing. I think in 2010, the organization crack sealed 860,000 linear feet. Last year, we did 1,800,000 with a goal of 2 million. And you know me, if we can hit 2 million, the goal will become 2.5 million if we can. But yeah, crack sealing is very, very important to maintaining existing pavement as it's deteriorating, and plus to properly maintain new pavement.
Thank you. And if again, an aside, because this is the first budget round for you and new books, I missed that element out of what we were starting to get into in the balanced scorecard system that we had, where we were talking about what we were actually trying to do with this money and how well we were doing on those objectives, such as prevention. So just an aside, and thank you very much for that answer. It's good to see it coming along. Thank you, Deputy Mayor.
Mr. Copples?
Is it possible for you to get us a detailed list of all equipment you've purchased in the last 3 years?
Yeah, sure. Fleet can probably get that pretty quick for you.
Okay.
Yeah, we can put something together.
I understand the variables makes it rather complex. You know, you have extreme weather conditions, it's hot, it's cold, you know, commodities are going up. So I want to say thank you for what you do, because it's very complex, especially your department.
Thank you.
And I will say, when Ron was over Fleet, that he patched on some things until he couldn't patch anymore, that you guys are in need of. I mean, we're in need all over, but I remember there was one thing they couldn't even find parts for, and Ron and his guys, whatever they did, they put it together. But you know, so we're in need of a lot of equipment. I know that. We just can't afford it, but there's a big need. Any other questions or concerns? Okay.
Okay.
Continue.
Let's go back to page 109, and I'll go to forestry. That should complete up that page. Again, forestry is funded through the general fund, and it's responsible for the tree and landscape care for all of the city of Topeka rights-of-way and then city-owned properties. This group, help me here, Mike, I know I got my notes. Here we go. They maintain about 680 centerline miles of right-of-way, so out there with tree trimming, et cetera, and 161 miles of alley, you know, trimming trees and like that down through the alleys, et cetera. And then on top of that, they also do the landscape and irrigation maintenance at the city-owned facilities they maintain, and the roundabouts. They also working with the Kansas Avenue landscapes, you know, the flower beds, et cetera, down Kansas Avenue. They maintain, and then also they maintain the 3 city cemeteries that they work with, and one is still active. Mount Auburn is still active with burial contracts and et cetera like that. That is primarily, you know, what forestry. There's 9 FTEs, and that's you know, that's that area. If there's any questions on that group.
Karen?
Got 2. One, forestry section was at 9 back when we had the Parks Department, and people from this section did work on the parks. Are we still doing work on what are now the county parks with this staff?
There is some work, major tree removals for the county. We do assist them because they do not have a forestry section. So we are doing those things in exchange for all the plantings, they grow for us on Kansas Avenue.
And second, you mentioned the cemeteries. We used to fund the cemeteries and spend a lot of time on them every year. We funded the cemeteries separately. Is that still in here, or has the cemetery maintenance transitioned into forestry?
The, two different things.
Okay.
The funding that the city provides to Rochester and Topeka Cemetery is separate and distinct from our maintenance of the Mount Auburn Cemetery, South Topeka or Ritchie, and the Curtis.
Could you explain what forestry is doing and what they're doing?
The money for Topeka Cemetery and the Rochester Cemetery goes strictly to those organizations. The boards of those respective organizations use that money, and we have no involvement in it from the Public Works side. In the case of Mount Auburn Cemetery, we actually manage that cemetery. There are active burials. We mow it. We maintain it. We maintain the headstones. The Ritchie Cemetery, we mow there, but there's really not too much to do there. The Curtis Cemetery is technically the city's, but it's maintained by a local resident. And so we really don't have any responsibilities there, other than we are technically responsible for it.
Okay, so when you mentioned cemeteries, we were talking the same ones.
Correct.
You're not working at the,
At Rochester or Topeka, we do not do any work.
thank you.
Mike, where's the Curtis Cemetery?
The Curtis one is just off of North Topeka Boulevard, about 5 blocks north of the bridge on the left there. It's kind of a trail that runs along a trail,
Oh, okay, I'm with you now.
Very s-
Okay,
very
yeah,
small.
very small.
very small. It's a family cemetery basically, and so the family has chosen to maintain that area.
Okay, okay, all right. I'm sorry,
What-
Councilman Campos.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. What are the figures we give to those two cemeteries? How much do we give them?
Let's see, I think it's Pam.
Topeka Cemetery, what we've given them in the past is $100,000 a year, and that's what we have built into the budget under the cemeteries. And Rochester's $60,000 a year is what they've gotten the last couple of years.
Are we legally obligated to give that to them?
Well,
That's a choice by the city council.
unless we want to own some cemeteries.
Okay.
I mean, if we want to go in the cemetery business, we can take it back, but. And do we know if, the Topeka Cemetery came to us and said, if you give us another, what was it, 40 or 10 or whatever, they thought they would be more financially. Do we know if they still need that 100,000 or if they've done anything? Because they were supposed to do this website, blah, 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 blah. Oh, I'm sorry.
Actually, we've been in touch with the Topeka Cemetery and the new management there, and they are supposed to bring forward a proposal. And I spoke recently with Terry, the manager there, because they had not come forth, and she said, well, we kind of heard the budget was so tight that we decided not to, and I recommended to her, I said, well, go ahead and submit your proposal. It did include buying some new software, but it would be an investment that the city would essentially have to make in that software to allow them to use that. And they also offered, they felt like they could take over then the management of the Mount Auburn Cemetery as well, because they're adjacent. But
Right.
that has not, we have not received that yet from them.
But it was my understanding they came back after budget, do you remember this, Richard? They came back after budget and asked for that money and said that they were, do you remember that, Pam, that they were gonna, it would cut their budget and, until it would eventually cut it out, and I just didn't know where we're at on that.
At the time, what they were talking about was trying to do money raiser for historical site and getting donations and stuff like that. They were working with a grant writer and also kind of public relations type person. My understanding at this point, that's fallen through, that they're not continuing that. I don't know, maybe there's more going on, perhaps the mayor knows.
Mr.
Well,
Mayor?
I don't know, and also, if we want to go into this now, we're really on Public Works. Is this going to come up
that's-
later, at a later
true.
point
Yeah,
in our
that's true.
discussion? And maybe there would be some people here from Topeka Cemetery then.
Maybe we could get some, you're absolutely right. I think that's a very, something that we should look into, city manager, so we know what we're looking at, because they did promise us that they would start cutting it down and eventually cut it out. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Okay, no problem. Next, we'll go on to page 110. Let me skip fleet since Mike's up here, and we'll go through the other two areas that he has, and then I'll bring the fleet manager up. Their facilities maintenance, that is an internal service fund, or it's funded through the, internal service. Obviously, they maintain over 100 city-operated facilities, and it's staffed with, as we see, the 15 FTEs. And do the daily maintenance and repair operations for these facilities. Just to give you a breakdown kind of how that $1.6 million, there roughly $1.6 million is what I want to say, allocated, is 87% of it actually goes towards general fund type facilities, which of course is City Hall, TPAC, the LEC, this facility, the fire stations. So the bulk of that is, our general fund supported facilities. I just wanted to point out. Then the other 13% is they do some work for like the utility facilities, out at the water and the pump stations and like that. Again, it's more limited at those facilities because primarily all you maintain is the structure. From that standpoint, obviously all the equipment and the utility type things are funded under utilities. And actually, this is allocated back to utilities. So I just wanted to point out that the bulk of this fund does go towards general fund, is funded by the general fund departments because it's their major facilities. There was one reduction that we identified, and that is on page 110-1. It's bring janitorial services in-house. And this is kind of, I guess, be straight up. It's kind of a double-edged sword. Does it really save money? Does it not save money? Really, what you've got to look at when you go to in-house janitorial or facilities is what is the service-based requirements for that facility? And when you look at it is days of use, is it an 8 to 5 Monday to Friday building, or is it like this facility that's 7 by 24? Total hours per day, and then also public traffic. If you have a lot of public traffic coming into the building and you use a contractual type facility that only comes in at night, if anything happens, there's really nothing to handle situations from that. So those are kind of factors that we'd have to take into consideration. The other I would say the downside of going in-house is how do you cover, do you have enough manpower that you can rotate, because of sick, holiday, or not holidays, but vacations and like that. So therefore, you may have to have an extra person, which then adds to the cost to try to do it in-house in order so that you've got the coverage for all those facilities.
Are there any questions about that? Elaine?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I had actually a question on the forestry service.
Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay. And Pam kind of had alluded to the grant writing. I know the federal government gives out a lot of grants for going green and environmental EPA. Has the city ever applied for grants to work with, like Rosemary Menninger with the green spaces? And this goes to our, code enforcement where you tear something down and you put in a green space. I know we have a lot of cities across the nation that have done that. So is the city actively ever looking for grants that would fund things like the forestry division?
What do you say?
Not to my knowledge that would specifically address forestry functions. I mean, there have been some green space projects that have been developed. There's one over on Washburn that was done a few years ago with the removal of a bunch of houses. So there have been some things there. I think more of our green space stuff has been probably associated with utilities and the stormwater side. But we're always looking for grants.
Okay.
Of course, we need a grant writer right now.
Right, okay, thank you.
Well, can we go back to the janitorial service? If we do in-house, I just don't understand how that would work. Okay, now we have it Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, right, in the evenings. But like,
Correct.
like this facility, I mean, it's practically open 24 hours. Explain to me how that would work. Sell that to me. I'm just not getting it.
In the current, we have 2 people under contract who work in the building Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And
Just 2 people?
just 2 people, and they're here for, under their contract, they're probably here for a maximum of 4 hours.
Right.
It's a gentleman and his wife who do it. Bob's Janitorial has the current contract.
And they do what? They do the city hall,
They do City Hall, they do.
holiday?
They do the Holiday Building, they do the zoo, they do traffic operations, they do street. There's a couple other they do the fleet garages. I
An
think that's-
LEC?
An LEC. Actually, what's transpired here in the LEC is we've already noticed that Bob's Janitorial, in this case, we've adopted the first one. Item 1 here has already been adopted. Their last day, Bob's Janitorial's last day is the 19th of July. And we've hired a new employee who will work 40 hours a week. And we've been having problems in this building, and Chief Miller will tell you, because he's complained to me about it. And he understands the financial situation and how this evolved back in 2010, when the janitorial positions that we used to have in-house were all abolished under the reorganization at the city. So we went contract at that time, had no alternative but to do that. But now when we look at the janitorial, the contract price that we're paying for this building, we can save considerable dollars by hiring a maintenance worker 1, janitorial position. They start at about $11.59 an hour, I believe is the starting pay. With benefits, it's about $31,000. And we're paying $54,000 a year right now for the building. But they will work 40 hours a week instead of essentially 24 hours. If we look at 8 hours a day times 3, 24 hours we're getting. And we're gonna have this position work in this building. They'll start on Sunday and work through Thursday. We have another maintenance worker 2 position that helps in this building, and so they'll be here to cover on Fridays. And yes, it will be a little bit tight if that person is out sick or on vacation. But we can pull maintenance workers. We have a person now back at City Hall, covering City Hall and the Holiday Building. We have 2 out at the zoo, and so we can move them around as needed to cover the shortfall.
Now, will they continue to work the Monday, Wednesday, and Friday then? Are we looking at that, or are we looking at every day?
No, we'll have.
We'll go back to the every day?
We'll go back to the everyday. This is a 40-hour position. It will work Sunday through Thursday, and they'll work 8 hours a day. But they'll be here starting in the afternoons. So our other guy will kind of cover the mornings, so we've got coverage. Now, there's lots of things that happen in this building. With arrests, there's people who
Right.
throw up from being drunk, blood, you name it. And the officers are out in the field chasing guys, so
Right.
dirt, mud gets drug in.
Right.
It's a lot of space to maintain, and it just wasn't being done well. And when we started evaluating the costs, it's kind of like, oh my gosh, we maybe need to go the other way.
Okay, okay.
So that's how we got there, and then we also looked at City Hall and what we're doing over there in terms of City Hall, the municipal court, that area that we clean, and it's another target to bring that back in-house. We're just, so municipal court's the one that gets a lot of use because there's a lot of public going
Right,
in there. And
right. Okay, thank you. Okay, go ahead. Are there any more questions? I just got a better understanding of that. I just couldn't,
Okay. Next item, we'll go to the third item on there on page 110, parking administration. Again, this is an enterprise fund. It's funded through obviously the parking garage and parking meter fees or funds that are collected. It manages, as you can see, there are 3,293 on-street parking spaces and about 1,684 there in, it's 1,684 metered, I'm sorry, plus how many parking garages we have.
we have 7 that we operate. We actually own 8.
And basically, they, again, they're not general fund, they generate their own revenue and pay for their own services. Plus, they maintain Obviously, to try to manage the parking on Kansas Avenue so that it remains for the businesses on Kansas Avenue versus people working downtown and taking up all of those spaces. And we are currently working on a new parking study. There's been some questions. They're out doing some survey work right now. In fact, I ran into them one day on the street. They're out talking with the businesses right now, staff is, and gathering some information on how could we improve parking or better parking service, et cetera, downtown. So.
Okay. Elaine?
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. Several years ago, there was something that hit the media that I think it was a state worker, had a $14,000 fine or something like that. It had really built up, parking fines. Are we really working at getting that money in when there are parking fines? Is there a lot of outstanding fines that are not paid?
There are, and I don't know exactly what the number is today, but there's probably in the vicinity of at least $500,000 out there in uncollected parking fines. And a number of years ago, parking fines used to go through the municipal court, approximately 10 years ago or so. However, they pretty much languished in the court because they just didn't have time to pursue those. So a decision was made by the council that we would make that an administrative process. And so now they go to collections. We use a collection agency to go after those. And, you know, people move out of town, you can't find them. So some of that stuff we're starting to write off.
Is the collection agency paid based on what they collect?
Yes.
Okay. So have we changed collection agencies?
Actually, it went out as a bid process. We've had a couple different ones. Let's see here, I got a sheet here somewhere. And we sent out for collections, and I'm looking at the June report. We collected about $31,000 in meter fines, and we issued 1,566 tickets in the month of June.
Is there any way we could garnish wages once it reaches a certain, I know that'd have to go back through the courts, but, you know.
That is a method
Yeah.
that the collection agency uses, is to garnish wages where they can get them into court and do that.
Okay.
So there's a variety of things that they do to try to collect. But most of the cases that are uncollectible, there's some still on the books, they can't find the person anymore.
Do you know what the percent of, I mean, how much fine versus collection that we have? What percentage are we getting in collections of the fines?
Oh, gosh, right off the top of my head, I couldn't tell you, but I'd be happy to get that information
Okay.
for you.
Thank you.
Yep.
Are there any more questions or concerns? Okay, continue.
Okay.
Sorry. Councilman Schmidt?
What do we bring in total between the parking garages, the meters, and
Fines?
fines?
Year-to-date, about $1.6 million has come in, and the on-street total is about $377,000, and the surface lots, we also have surface lots, which we rent, it's about $43,000. And then the meters, it's about $100,000, and the remainders from the garages.
So that comes out to, at the end of the year, pretty close to
Up.
paying the 3.7
Yes.
budget total.
And that's what we anticipate. And it fluctuates. Garages go kind of up and down. They're, of course, the big moneymaker. And one of our problems right now is the Crosby garage, which is only 30% occupied. And if we could get that up, the other garages are in pretty good shape. Overall, we have an 87% rental rate in our 7 garages.
What's the major cost for these garages? I would imagine utilities, no?
Utilities, yes. There's very little on the mechanical side, but lighting is
Yeah.
major. So in excess of $200,000 a year in utility bills.
Have you considered working with the Sustainable Board to try to make these green?
Yes, it is one of the things that we're looking at, to change out the lighting. It's just, there are so many lights, it's really expensive to do that, but it is something that we need to do, absolutely. We agree, and it's trying to work that into the budget and start doing that kind of piecemeal over a few years. But there are also major repairs to the garages. They are steel and concrete structures, and we have major repairs that will be ongoing at Townside here shortly, just going out for bid. But through the winter, the cars drag salt from the streets in, and it penetrates that concrete. And of course, they're all steel reinforced. And as the salt penetrates, the steel starts to corrode, and we run into structural problems in the garages. So that's our major concern. With the exception of Townside, all of our garages are in pretty good shape. And so we're more in the PM mode than we are major repairs. But membranes, which we put down to protect the concrete from that salt penetrating, are extremely expensive. And that's a major dollar item for the garages.
What's your position on potentially privatizing these?
We've talked about that, actually putting them all up for sale. But right now, the only direction that we have is that 2 garages, which will be coming before you here probably later this month, are being considered for sale.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, Councilwoman Hiller.
Since Councilwoman Schwartz brought up the issue of the collections and so on, again, hopefully you've got it in your head, but like a 3-year history, could you talk a little bit about how those collections have changed with the, particularly with any other changes you've had, but particularly with the advent of the boot? For parking?
Yes.
Jeez.
What, 2 years ago, we implemented, we previously had not booted like a lot of communities do. And so we implemented a boot procedure, changed the ordinance to permit that. And what it's done is it's taken the repeat offenders kind of off the streets. So I've actually seen the ticket numbers go down because we've had fewer violations, more people are complying. Let's see, we didn't have any this past month. The month before, we had like 4 of them in 2 days. But we've had some high dollar ones. Most of the ones that we've booted have been in the $400 to $700 range that people owed. And until they pay it, they don't get their car back. So that has helped increase awareness in the downtown, but it's driven some out. We had one large customer get caught, which we were excited about. He didn't come back to claim his truck, so it sold on auction, and unfortunately, I think it sold for about $1,500, and it didn't help against his $15,000 bill. So that's the dilemma that we faced. But yes, it's helped.
Because people did come running in there.
Oh, yes, and they pay. They hustle. It's amazing how many different types of payment methods they can come up with.
Thank you.
Okay, let's move on. Before we do, I'd like to see us do more marketing with parking. I'm gonna use an example. Can't you come in and purchase that little green thing for like $30, $40 to put over a meter? Is that right, Mike?
Yes, we hood meters for certain functions. They're identified in.
No, I mean, like me as a person, can't I come in and and buy one of those for downtown?
There are certain criteria that have to be met in the city code. So if I wanted a parking spot, no, I couldn't just go in and buy a hood. They're reserved for special events, meetings that the state provides. There is some provisions for those with accessibility needs to use a hood. We use hang tags that
So
we can use around.
I could come in and purchase a hang tag, maybe is that
Yes,
what?
we have a hang tag program where you can park at any 10-hour meter, anywhere using your hang tag. Instead of paying that individual meter, you put your hang tag up. So if you want to park over here, this 10-hour meter, the hang tag's good. It's at a reduced rate.
And I thought it was the bag, but you're right, I think now that I think about it, it is a hang tag. We've just got to get the word out to downtown workers. I don't think we've done a good job at that, and I think we could do a better job at that. and that way that to make more money. Because I hear all the time, I didn't know that, or I didn't know that, or whatever, because there's a lot of people that walk, because, so they don't have to, go in the garages. Not everybody wants to park in the garage, and so I'd like to see us maybe think outside the box and do something like that, or maybe give out so many passes for a free day pass at one of the garages, get them in there and let them park in there, and then, hey, they might really like that, I wasn't a big garage parker, but I am now, since I started at work. I was like, it's kind of nice not going out, so I would pay that extra. Just kind of think of some ways outside the box to kind of get people parking, and because everybody gets upset with the tickets and the meters, and I just think education is a good key to do that, however we want to do that.
Doug mentioned earlier that Evelyn and Audrey were out canvassing the businesses.
We've done that before. Tanya's done
We have.
that before.
We have.
The biggest thing that I hear, and I'll be ready to move on, and I've given something to the mayor and I've given something to the city managers, you can only park downtown for 2 hours. 2 hours, and that's not, that's something we've got to look into change, not, because you're gonna get a ticket, and so, just different ways. And I didn't know that. The city manager was surprised that you can't park downtown but 2 hours. And he's like, no, you can go out and move your car to a different stall. No, you can't.
Not on
No, you
Kansas
cannot. And that's something this council's gonna have to look at, because that's the thing. People come downtown, to park, and, and I use that scenario. Guy comes down for a meeting, he's down there for an hour and a half, wife comes back to go get some chocolate, and boom, she's got a ticket. So that's something we have got to, and I took to the city manager, goes, that's not true. That's the biggest complaint that I hear. And the city manager's like, no, my hairdresser, she just goes out and moves her car. Well, your hairdresser's about to bring you a ticket. Anyway, that's something we have to work on, but we've done surveys, we've done the free parking, we just gotta continue to think outside and just try to see where we could do to enhance that for you guys. Anybody else? No? Okay, let's move on.
Okay. Then I'll move to, let's go to the top of page 110, Fleet Services.
Thanks, Mike.
It maintains 3 maintenance facilities and repairs about 895 vehicles and pieces of equipment. It has 23 full-time employees. Just to give you, of that, you see that $1.8 million budget, and it's an internal service. 55% of that is allocated basically to public works functions, which is utilities and transportation. So it's paid, 55% of it's paid outside the general fund. The other 45% is basically is funded by the general fund through the internal service funding system, and 44% of that goes for the police and fire. Obviously, they're the 2 biggies that utilize those, those services to maintain their vehicles. Basically, that's, the key there with fleet as far as operations. The 3 garages, for some of you that, if you're new, and I'm learning where they all are too, is there's one down at the street department, which basically is where all of the street transportation and utility vehicles are repaired. So essentially, that garage is funded through the, those 2 funds. There is a vehicle, what we call the light duty garage here, right, Brian? At this facility, which obviously its primary function is police vehicles. And also they're doing the upfit, all of those, 30 new Explorers?
25 new Explorers.
25 new Explorers. They're also doing the upfit. That was the decision made. The chief funded them, however, through lease financing, but they have to be upfitted. Obviously, a police car doesn't come in with all of the gear in it. And so his department is doing that to get those new Explorers up and running. And then, of course, what we call the heavy duty garage is over at the fire station. What is it, number 3 there?
Yes.
Main headquarters. And basically, they maintain fire, the fire department vehicles all over there. Now, just so that you understand, my understanding in talking with them is if they get backlogged over at street, they may move some of that heavy equipment over to fire so that the, those mechanics aren't just sitting over there if there isn't any fire trucks to work on. They are moving equipment around to make sure that they're being, utilized, to keep the backlog from, on the equipment. Obviously, as we know, utility and street vehicles, as we've already talked, their main, their major repair items. Street sweepers are probably one of your worst things to have to maintain, because they take abuse out there, all day long as they're out there. So that's primarily what we've got on fleet services. One thing I just wanted to introduce and just make you aware of is we are working on a fleet replacement plan. We've developed a replacement criteria which we based on life cycle cost. We've identified units that meet that replacement criteria and have come up with an estimated purchase cost. What we're working on is we're working on the projected savings, because obviously I can't come to you and say I need $9 million or whatever it is to go buy brand new vehicles. There's got to be something on the other side that we're gonna save. We can't just spend additional money, there's gotta be savings. And obviously the savings will be in increased resale value if you get into that where you're rolling your vehicles on a better basis, increased resale value, fuel savings, reduced maintenance, driver downtime, and that's the key one. Coming from the private side, I know how to do driver downtime on the private side because those drivers generate revenue. Outside of the utility division, how do you say, that's the kind of, is having a factual number that's actually savings from that standpoint. And then spare vehicle reduction. One thing you'll find when you get if you get your fleet updated, you can get rid of a lot of spare vehicles that are sitting around that do cost you. They may not be running a lot, but they do cost you because you got to keep them in operation, and they obviously continue to depreciate. We've also have identified underutilized vehicles, and we're working with those departments right now to make sure they really are underutilized, and could we eliminate those from the fleet, because obviously that would eliminate, it wouldn't reduce a lot in fuel, but we still have to maintain them, but there is insurance coverage, there is from that standpoint, so we've got to look at that. And just to give you, it is about 200, there are urgent replacement is about 258 vehicles across the city, not just general fund, is about, a replacement cost is about $9 million for that. 115 of those are general fund vehicles, which would take about 2.6 million or 7 million. And of that, 81 of them are within the police department, which would take about 1.67 million from there. So we have identified things. We're putting together a plan, to try to look at that. But obviously, we've got to work up. You got to have some savings to go spend money. I can't just spend money. So I recognize that, and I just wanted to introduce that to you and let you know that we are working on that at this time.
Are there any other questions for fleet? Okay.
Would you want to introduce the person to your right?
Brian
Bigenwalt.
Thank you.
Brian is our fleet manager. I know him as Brian. I'm glad he said his last name because I'm trying to know everybody here first. But he's doing a good job for me and getting me a lot of information. And we're gonna, like I said, we're gonna keep working on this fleet plan and try to maintain this fleet and get it in better shape.
Thank you.
May I real quick? Deputy Mayor? I'm just curious, what is this contractual line? What are we contracting out? $347,000?
The contractual line is where all of the a lot of the internal service charges come in. He's charged for facility charges because he has buildings, IT, telephone, all of those type functions are in that line, correct?
Right.
Okay. Thank you very much.
With that, we'll continue on page 10. Let's go down to water utility. And the water utility, I'll bring Don up here. He's the utility superintendent, so he handles all three of these utilities for me. The water utility, obviously, we supply the drinking water, in Topeka, Shawnee County, and some surrounding counties. It's operated, maintained, and improved entirely by fees for services, so none of this comes from the general fund. The water utility has 4 functional areas: customer service, which is the call-in center, which if you want to turn your water on, turn your water off, pay your bill, et cetera. Utility infrastructure, which is maintaining all the water lines out there. Water services, and then, of course, and then business services really is just the finance end of running the business of the utility. Again, it's a large budget there of 33 million with 120 FTEs, but again, it has, you know, it is funded through service, obviously the water service fees that we charge. So, I don't know if there's any.
What's business services? Is that just, I mean, would that fall into the same category as customer?
Our business services does the budgeting, accounting, and
Oh, okay.
they provide a lot of the internal services support. The budget's large because it carries things like our depreciation, debt service, and those sorts of things.
Okay, thank you, Don. Elaine?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. So is there a reserve fund in this? I mean, this is drinking water that we have, so what are the reserves that we have built up in this?
Yeah, we do not have what you would call reserve fund. We have the same as on the city general fund, as we have an ending fund balance. We'll have a target for that ending fund balance, but for water, that target is about $4 million is what we try to end the year with. So this year, with the current projects and operations, we're estimating we'll end the year about $4.5 million is our projection.
Thank you.
And one thing I might add, this is probably one of our more volatile fee accounts because, as you know, in a drought season, we'll see water usage go up. Obviously, you know, it was a little wetter spring, so we're seeing what revenue's down right now.
Yes.
You know, for as far as, you know, people that didn't need to buy water for yards and like that.
Karen?
Just for Councilman Schwartz and the new council members especially, could you talk just a little bit more about that fund balance? Because that may be a session in and of itself that those of us who've been around a little have had, but there are obligations against that fund balance because it's used to guarantee some things and so on. Could you address that briefly?
Yeah, our water utility, actually, all of the enterprise funds, you know, they have a variety of makeup where that money needs to go. So we will have restricted money. If we borrow money, that money becomes a restricted fund. And then we have projects that we try to pay cash out for the projects. And so when we have the revenue come in, we're going to estimate the amount of revenue we have, and then we're going to estimate the amount of operation and maintenance expenses we have, and then the cash that we're going to spend for projects. And that's from those then that we're projecting our ending fund balance. I'm not too sure that's real clear.
I think that helps some. We'll see more in the capital improvement budget with those projects and so on.
Ideally, we would like to have our revenue be higher than our O&M budget so that what that equals is being able to spend cash on projects then and keep from debt financing.
Any other questions? Okay, continue.
Next item there, same on page 110, is the stormwater utility. Again, this utility serves approximately 47,000 customers and is the operations and maintenance of the flood protection and drainage systems throughout the city. We have of course, the levees. Got that. There's about 22 miles of levee. There's which includes, 10 pumping stations, 75 flood control structures, 250 miles of storm sewer piping, and then, of course, inlets, manholes, et cetera. And so that, again, is a utility that we, charge for that based on impervious, it's an ERU, an equivalent residential unit, right?
Mm-hmm.
Equivalent residential unit, and then businesses are charged on so many ERUs based on their percentage of impervious, which means the water is actually running off into the stormwater system. And so basically that, again, there's 24 in that, and it's about a $6 million budget, and again, it's funded by fees. It's not coming out of the general fund or anything.
Any questions? Elaine?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. And what's the ending balance on this at the end of the year?
Our projected ending balance this year is $1.9 million. It's what we're projecting at the end of 2013.
Thank you.
Michelle?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. This is more a question for Pam. When we have these funds that are remaining funds that we're receiving from fees, not so much from taxes, what are the mechanisms of investments that we're utilizing?
The city keeps all their money in a pooled cash account. That means we pool everybody's money together and we invest that. In fact, we just this year have started a more aggressive investment policy. We are restricted by state law what we can invest in. So basically, we can only invest in pretty secure things. The idea is to keep the principal intact, but we are out buying, like, we just bought school district bonds in western Kansas. Some of those things are on the market. It is our hope to increase our return on investment income than what we've had in the past years. In the past years, we've simply used the MIP, which is the Municipal Investment Pool run by the state. We didn't get a good return, so now we're trying to go out on our own and invest in other devices to try and earn that interest up.
Thank you very much.
Any other questions? Karen?
I want to throw out one thing, and that is that traditionally, somehow, when the funding source for these three utilities comes up, it's like, well, they're funded by fees. Just want to throw out that we are just as responsible to be good stewards of these utility fee dollars as we are of general fund dollars. And sometimes the utilities have really been set aside in terms of oversight by the council. It's really important, and our rates are high, and we have a lot of obligations and a lot of things that we need to do. So with that, can you address for all three utilities, whether when there was downsizing done in the last 3 years, whether there was a downsizing in staff amongst these utilities, and whether or not that occurred, talk about performance improvements and economies in the way the utilities are operated?
Yeah, I don't recall, I don't believe we've had any staff reductions over the last 3 years.
Okay.
We're implementing right now across the board a little change in some of our comprehensive plan for the utilities. We're implementing some new business practices that focus on key process indicators, and we're in the process of developing those. Those are identify areas where we have weaknesses so that we can focus on those weaknesses and improve them. The nice thing is they're focused on utility-type indications where we can compare how we're doing against other utilities across the United States. So those would be one of the major practices that we're looking to put into place in order to make sure we're performing at least to have targets of areas that need improvement. Some of those would be in the quality of service to our customers. Some of them would be in cost controls or just process controls that could result in lower costs.
So, and I'm asking this, it's not meaning to be critical, but, so you're looking at doing that in the future. There aren't any major improvements in that arena that have developed in the previous 3 years yet?
Well, in the previous 3 years, what we started working on is looking at the asset management, changing the way that we were looking at doing our assets and how we were planning to do our assets. And so we're very asset intensive. We've got a lot of water mains, sewer mains, stormwater mains, large treatment facilities that need to be maintained, and it was always a surprise sometimes when some major repair needed to be done. So water mains, are a good example. We're trying to work on a plan right now where we identify specific funding, the funding source, what is going to be the long-term best plan for the city to renew that infrastructure, reduce maintenance costs. So, you know, as you're aware, last year, we had very high maintenance costs related to water main breaks. And so, we're looking at increases in some of our replacement program, and how do we get some of the cost of those water main breaks down, for example. So, you know, just water main breaks, we're looking at how do we reduce the cost per repair, and then how do we eliminate the need for repair through the replacement.
Thank you. Any other, yes, Elaine?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I have several questions, and I'm going to read them off to you because I've had several constituents ask me this. So, and you don't have to give me the answers today. You can get, and I can even send this on to you, but I want the other council members to know that this is being asked. How much money has been collected and by whom for stormwater runoff fees since the fee rates became effective May 1st, 2008 and before? Secondly, what have those fee funds been spent on, which I think you've kind of gone through some of that. What is the authority for the collection of those fees? Is it the Clean Water Act or the EPA? Are they part of the city budgeted funds available for citywide usage? So then the email goes on to say that the developer, when they put in the development, they put in the streets, curbs, gutters, storm sewer systems, all that to the developer's cost. The developer is then required to turn those over to the public authorities at zero cost. If the city or whomever dictates the design of these systems, which includes stormwater runoff, causes them to build in accordance with public dictates at no cost to the public body, why does the public authority then get to turn around and charge fees for rainwater runoff?
Elaine, to be fair to staff, if you could send
email
them to the city manager in an email, I think that would be fair.
Yeah, there's a lot of questions there.
A lot of questions and the length of that.
Okay, thank you.
Don, don't worry about answering that. Let us do it that way, okay? Okay.
Put together this.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, can we continue on with wastewater? Are we done with, we're done, that was stormwater?
That
so-
was stormwater,
Okay,
yes.
now let's go, continue on with wastewater.
Okay, wastewater, the last there, utility, again, that's obviously the wastewater utility. It treats about 18 million gallons per day. And we, not only do we operate and maintain 3 plants, one of them we receive additional fees from, Sherwood, Lake Sherwood area. The city has 2 plants, and then we also run the Lake Sherwood plant. And then, of course, there's about, 880 miles of sanitary sewer lines that we're maintaining, and then the related structures that go along with that, pumping stations, manholes, et cetera. And again, that is funded through the wastewater fee that each one of us, property pays for that service.
Okay, any questions or concerns? Okay, only question I have is the business services. Do they do all 3, or do you have, each one is separately, or can they do all 3 for you?
Yeah, we have one business services that provides all of those functions for our water, wastewater, and stormwater.
Okay, so it's not like you need 10 for water, 10 for
No.
storm, or 10?
That group actually has 4, and they do all 3 of them.
They do all 3, okay.
All 3 of the utilities.
Okay, thank you. Yes,
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. What is the ending balance on the?
The ending balance for 2013 that we're projecting is $3,800,000.
okay, any other questions? If not, we'll move right along.
Okay, I think that wraps up Public Works.
That wraps up Public Works, okay. I think it's very good dialogue, and if we could take just a 5-minute break, just a 5-minute break, Mr. Mayor. And that's all we're gonna take, is just 5 minutes, so.
5 minutes.
Okey-doke, here we go.
We only lost all the public works people.
Okay.
What's up, Bill?
I do appreciate the dialogue that we're having, but we only have, an hour and 5 minutes. So we need to really think about our time, and if we could, council members, but I do appreciate the dialogue that we're having. So if we can continue, City Manager?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I'd like to ask Mr. Fyander, Planning Director, to, beginning on page 89 of your books, walk through the Planning Department budget.
Thank you, Mr. City Manager. Deputy Mayor, if we're all there. Planning Department, overall main function, if I may, is to really oversee the land use approval process for the city.
And Bill, if I
Yeah.
may interrupt you, there, you do have in your packet, the new part to insert, right?
Is it
Sorry
pos-
about that.
No,
Is it possible, City Manager, to get these packets before these meetings happen?
Yes, we will make every attempt to do it. In some cases, some changes are made at the end, but yes.
Thank you.
It's 89, let's see, we need to insert 89 and 90. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Planning Department's main function, to sum it up, is really to oversee the land use approval process for development in the city, and plan for the growth of the city. A number of activities that are broken up into 4 of our service categories, but to give you an overview, the total budget of the department at $1.034 million. Of that, 86% of that is general fund. That's about $888,000. The other remaining portion, the 14%, is a transportation grant we received from the federal government that's passed through KDOT to us for regional transportation planning. The bulk of the budget, of the general fund budget, is staff costs and benefits, about 84%. That includes 11 FTEs. Breaking that down a little bit further into what our services are and some of the deliverables. Again, you start out with administration, which is just 2 FTEs, myself, and an office specialist to help provide direction and support for staff. We also coordinate within the department 4 different planning bodies that we work with. The main one is Planning Commission, but we also staff Board of Zoning Appeals, Landmarks Commission, and the Metropolitan Topeka Planning Organization, otherwise known as the MTPO. That's our transportation planning body. The administration takes about 21% of our general fund. Next, we have probably the lion's share of our staff and budget go into current planning. Current planning has to deal with processing of zoning and subdivision cases where someone wants to change zoning or subdivide land. That also includes, probably for every case you see, we have another 4 or 5 cases that you never see. These are things that we constantly are working with as people come to us trying to develop and trying to weigh their options and see what they can do if things fall through for no other reason than that's just the way things are in the market. Current planning has 4 FTEs, 1 manager, 2 planners, and a zoning enforcement or zoning inspector as part of that. So, which I forgot to include, enforcement is a major part of administering the zoning code. So, those are the deliverables. The next service would be comprehensive planning. Comprehensive planning, again, as I mentioned, we're planning for the long-range growth of the city and sustainability. We do, under that, maintain the comprehensive plan, which there are 7 elements. We have 14 neighborhood plans. We have started neighborhood conservation districts recently, working with a couple of neighborhoods. We have historic preservation, working through the Landmarks Commission, as well as we also have annexation issues that section deals with. So those are 3 FTEs there. We have a manager and 2 planners to staff that. And lastly, we have transportation planning. Transportation, from a staff cost standpoint, only makes up 2% of our budget because most of it is covered through the federal grants that come through for the MPO. We also have some funding. One of those positions is funded 20% by the TMTA, the Metro Transit Authority. So all in all, it's a very little hit to the general fund, but a very important nonetheless, as we have to staff the regional transportation body that is required by federal law, and also to get funding from the federal funding for our transportation projects, we do need to maintain that. So that's 2 FTs, with very little impact on the general fund. Proposed cuts, really what we looked at is working into 2014 where the staff cost reductions that have recently incurred. There were 3 positions within the department that we filled at a much lesser cost than what they were previously filled at. So the projections for 2014 are showing at what the old expectation was to fund those positions. All in all, it's about an 8% reduction in our staff cost for 2014 by underfilling those positions. It's about $79,000 savings. The lion's share of that was our new zoning inspector. We did hire at a much lower rate. The previous inspector was there for 26 years and was just a natural savings that we can incur. That was just recently filled. So those are really the main cuts that we are looking at, reductions. Then those are kind of locked in as we speak. So I'll open it up for any questions that anybody may have.
Are you through with your presentation?
Yes.
Okay, I just wanted you to get totally done. Okay, are there any questions for Bill? Karen?
Just real quickly, could you give us a capsule idea of how this budget compares to the last 3 years?
Other than wages going up a little bit, I mean, there is no new programs or functions that we're taking on that we need to fund here. The only increases that we're looking at are pretty minor in terms of we expect to have more meetings. We expect to engage the community more, so there's more notices going out. We have to pay for security when we have meetings at our building. We have new staff members that we have to train, so there's a little bit of increase in there, but all in all, it is, I would say, pretty similar to what we've had in the past.
And pretty adequate to provide the services that
I'm satisfied with. I think we can do more with what we have. Yes.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Bill, have you ever thought about having your meetings over here so you don't have to pay for security?
No, I haven't thought of that.
Okay. And I know I had to retrain my mind when the security started being a big issue. And that's why we're here today, is so we don't have to pay that extra. But I understand it might not always be available, but that might be food for thought for you.
Yeah, the one thing that we do have is we have televised meetings, and so there is some aspects to work out with that.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's true. Okay. Any other questions, Elaine?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. One quick question. Are there any projects in 2014 that we would have to issue revenue bonds for?
From our department, no.
Okay. So the city really doesn't have any big projects out there for 2014 that we'd have to go after bonds?
I don't, our department does not get involved with projects. I guess, you're talking about construction type projects, we do not get involved with that.
Okay, so planning doesn't have anything to do with that?
We'll plan, and we will work with other departments on the planning and implementing it, but they take over the administration of that construction engineering part of it. Yeah.
Okay. Mr. Mayor, did you have?
Well, I was just going to, on page 90 at the bottom, there is a expenditure reduction, but that's what you were referring to and that has been realized, is that correct?
Yes, I mean, moving forward, we've already locked that into our, so the new salary figures that aren't reflected in what the numbers you have before you would be a reduction of, what did I say? Well, it says 46,000 for the zoning inspector, for instance. That has been, or would be realized over the course of all of 2014. That's what it would, the savings it would be. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions or concerns? If not, Bill, you're off the hook.
Well, thank you.
Housing and Neighborhood Development is next. Thank you, Bill.
Thank you. And as Mr. Reef is getting ready, I'll make reference, it starts on page 54
Thank
in your
you.
books.
Is there a new section? There is. All right, Brad, let's go.
All righty. Housing and Neighborhood Development. Kind of give you guys a little brief focus of what we do. Our department is all about, truly when you get down to it, neighborhoods, improving and enhancing neighborhoods throughout town. Our total budget for 2014 is $4.9 million. We currently have 13 full-time equivalents. The source breakdown, we are a little unique from a number of the other departments in that 89.3% of our funding comes from the federal government. Only about 10% roughly is through general fund and other city resources. Let me go down the funding source breakdown with you really quickly. The general fund of $322,000, $100,000 of that is for match for one of our federal programs. $141,000 is for grants to youth and social service agencies. And as the city manager discussed Tuesday night, we are looking at doing a new process with the youth and social service grants. In the past, as part of the budget process, this body has decided those allocations on budget night. What we are suggesting and looking at is having a process outside of that where, as part of the budget process, this body would set a dollar amount, X. We would then accept out applications and they would be reviewed by the Citizens Advisory Council, who would make a recommendation back to this body.
Yes.
Deputy Mayor, just to support Brad's conversation, I had provided to you a review of what that would look like, and just to make sure that Brad's on the same page, I'm going to give him a copy.
I think,
We got that.
yeah, we got that this morning. It's just that one sheet.
That's right. Yes.
Thank you, City Manager. That would help to give Brad that copy.
Thank you. And then to wrap out the general fund, about $81,400 in wages and benefits. That's primarily tied to staffing that do things not necessarily tied to our federal grants. I can only charge staff time to the federal grants for stuff we do on federal grants. Anything above and beyond that, I have to find other resources for. What we're calling our enterprise fund, the $204,000, that's really tied to two of our inmate crews that we have in H&D. And this is a combination of a state grant of $64,000 and then various city resources. The police department kicks in $65,000 as part of their contractual services from what they used to do for mowing. That supports one crew. And then numerous other departments through the city, primarily Public Works and H&D, city manager, provided small amounts to fund the second crew to do various activities for those departments. Then lastly, the other fund, that is our federal funds. We do base this off of the 2013 funding limits that we have. Congress has in both the House and the Senate, the HUD transportation subcommittees have done their markups. The House is looking at substantial cuts to our federal programs. The Senate's looking at fairly decent increases. So for the time being, though, we just base everything off of the 2013 figures. Real quickly, I just wanted to kind of give you guys the highlights of the things that we do. We split these, what we do, into kind of 6 different categories. We have our housing programs, which is the bulk of what H&D does, you know, be it housing rehab, assisting first-time home buyers, emergency repairs. Our community development program, which includes our neighborhood empowerment program for the neighborhoods. So we're doing public infrastructure improvements, streets, sidewalks, curbs, gutters. And then our inmate crews, 2 of our inmate crews are in that component. Neighborhood services, that is the support that we provide to the neighborhood improvement associations, as well as our neighborhood cleanups that we do. Our homeless programs is our 4th component. Primarily, we have 2 programs there that we look at, is the Shelter Plus Care program, which is a rental assistance program, and then our Emergency Solutions Grant, which provides various activities for homeless providers. Switching over to page 55, Youth and Social Services. CDBG, we've set aside $140,000.
56?
It's 56 on that.
I'm sorry, I had my number wrong. 56. Youth and Social Services, CDBG grant of $140,000, general fund grant of $41,000, and then we have some staffing related to operating the city grants. Lastly, administration, that is basically our efforts to implement primarily the federal programs. In terms of the expenditure and reductions, what we looked at, because we are fairly limited on what general fund money does come through our department, that's not tied to a specific federal grant or requirement under the federal grants. What we're looking at would be a 5% decrease on the Youth and Social Service general fund, which would total 16 grand. The potential alternatives for this, you know, these agencies could always look to private funding, but, you know, from what we've heard, you know, that is not an easy task to go out and solicit additional funding. You know, we're not completely out of this recession that we had a few years ago, so that's difficult. The other option that we could look at is we could potentially fund these youth and social service activities through the CDBG program. These are considered a public service under CDBG. We are capped at 15%, and we are right at our cap, which means we'd have to cut something out. In order to do that, if we wanted to fund youth and social services through CDBG totally, we'd have to look at cutting out NIA support and our anti-blight, our neighborhood cleanups. With that, I will stand for questions.
With that, you're gonna have a fight on your hands.
And that's why I'm not recommending it.
Well, whoever is.
I don't believe that we are.
Yeah.
As
Okay.
part of the informed decision process,
Right.
every time we made a cut, we just identified what some potential alternatives were.
All right,
So
make
no,
it
we're not
clear, make
recommending
it clear, make it clear. And I see down here, I guess it's an alternative, elimination of NIA support, the newsletters and the operations. I don't think we utilize our NIAs to get the information out there, the newsletters, as much as we could, you know. How do we do that? That's a good question. I mean, you know, I see some NIAs, they do it by email. I see some NIAs, they don't send out a newsletter, they just send out a card. I mean, and I know that goes back to the presidents, and I do tell the presidents, you guys are not utilizing the free things that are out there. We've just got to try to figure that out. Are there any questions or concerns, Mr. Mayor?
Yes. Thank you, Deputy Mayor. And there's a lot of these areas that are mainly federal funds and programs that we're in the process of, I think all of us need to know more about. One of the areas is the demolishing blighted structures. That comes up, you know, council members at different times, and we don't have enough funds for that. In here then, is it $100,000 to demolish dilapidated structures? And I know we talked at times, we have a long list, but we're only doing the first 100,000, and we have all these we carry over year to year.
Right.
Is there a process, and maybe we should look at adding some general funds so we have more funds available for this purpose?
Right. The 100 grand that you're referencing is actually part of the code enforcement budget. So I would defer those to
I
them.
see.
We are looking at allocating, we have a old revolving loan fund of CDBG funds that we are looking at potentially using to help the code enforcement folks knock down some structures. We're currently in the process of kind of getting all the stuff in order on that. This would be a one-time kind of push of money to help with that. Within the CDBG program itself, we do have a voluntary demolition program where owners of dilapidated structures can apply to us, and we will go out and demolish the house, put a lien against the property, and then those repayment terms are dependent upon what they ultimately do with that property.
Yeah, I'm referencing in here, it's on that, under housing development, it says demolish 4 blighted structures
Yeah.
as part of the voluntary demolition program, and that's what that is.
Yeah.
On the same, you have, you expect to rehabilitate 105 homes through major rehab, et cetera. Do these people apply directly to you, or how are they aware of this program?
Correct. They apply directly to us. You know, we try to get the word out as much as we can. You know, the NIAs are a valuable tool in terms of getting that word out, in terms of the various programs that we do have. You know, coming out of the neighborhood summit, one of the things we heard was communication. So I think that's something that we're definitely looking at is, you know, how can we improve those avenues?
I think for me, it's like we had programs, they're no longer there, and now we have new programs have changed, and I think we just need to get a clear understanding of what we have, and then try to get that word out there, because, you know, people ask me, like I had somebody that asked me about air conditioning units, and I think Jenny researched it. I have a neighbor that's in her 90s, I think 92, and her air conditioning unit went out. And I was like, oh, go to the emergency program, but then I don't think that we have that in there. Is that correct?
Correct.
And so that's what I'm saying, I think we all just need a clear understanding of what is available. And I would agree, communication, even on my part, I'll stand up and I'll be the first one to say that. But I need to know, because we've done so many made so many changes of what we have and what we don't. But anyway, I think that would really, really help. And then, you know, I know that one of the NIAs that I was at this week, they said if we could just have one person to go to, city manager. I don't know if in housing and neighborhood development that could answer whatever questions that arose within that neighborhood, you know, as opposed to different avenues. And I don't know, you know, because you get one person on the phone and no, we don't have it, and you get another one, you know, and again, it's educating everybody to what we have, but that one contact person. City Manager, did you want to reply on that?
Yeah, thank you, Deputy Mayor. We've had several conversations for several months about this, and as a result of conversations with many of you and members of the NIAs and the Neighborhood Summit, we have been working towards that, and it really is a position bigger than HND, but somebody who really has the ability to address code issues and HND issues and planning and everything else. And so we've been working towards identifying that position and its role within the organization, but we totally agree that we need, for lack of a better term, either a neighborhood partnership officer or an ombuds person, but we're very close to bringing that forward, and it has been included in the current budget.
And I thought that was Rosanna's position. But again, positions have changed, people have come and gone, so I'm not really sure, you know, because I do hear, well, we call her, but, you know, she's not calling us back, or that's not the right person, or whatever their answers might be. So, again, if we can just have that, I think that would be very.
Deputy Mayor, thank you. We are going to bring that forward very quickly.
Okay. My other question is, Brad, I know some of this is federally funded, so I know we have to meet certain criterias. Have we met all that with what you're proposing? Okay, okay. And I'll study this some more, so I'm sure I'll have some more questions for you.
Definitely.
Michelle?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Brad, how many demolition requests do we get in a year?
I would have to go back and take a look to give you a firm number, but typically, you know, we're doing 4 to 5 a year, and we'll probably get somewhere in the neighborhood of 5 to 10 requests. You know, there are issues that we run into, and this is not just with the demolition program, but with all of our programs. One of the key things that folks who come to utilize our programs, they cannot owe the city any money. You know, municipal court fines, water fee, you know, whatever it be. It's Resolution 7580. And typically, that's one of the first things that will knock people out, is that resolution.
And that also applies for the services of
Correct.
rehabilitation
Yep.
that could be being worked within the neighborhoods?
Yep.
Okay.
And don't we have a list? I thought we had a list of houses that need to be,
Well, and let me make sure that we're all clear. This is separate from the code enforcement list of properties that they have
okay.
to demolish, yes.
but sometimes we need to use that money for that, for code.
Yeah,
right?
and one of the things code does, once they identify these properties, is first they refer them to us to see if we can utilize our resources to get that thing down. So
So
there,
if you
there's a
have-
partnership between us and code.
If you have codes list, where does this list come from? Where does your list come from?
It's as owners of properties apply to us.
Oh, okay. So
Yeah.
these are people that are applying, asking
Right.
for help. Code
Exactly.
is basically.
We're telling you. Yeah.
Okay, all right, okay. Asking, telling, okay, got it. Okay, hey, thanks. I was like, wow, okay. So we basically have two lists.
Mhm.
Can you provide to us how long each list is?
Yeah, definitely, yeah.
Okay.
Pa-
Not to cut
Patty
you off,
prepares a
Michelle, but
list.
that's a good question.
Okay.
Okay. Are you through, Michelle?
I am. The only thing that I would add is I'm very excited to see, kind of seconding what the mayor said on Tuesday with regards to the new process for the grants. I think it's wonderful. They were talking a little bit on Tuesday, you talked a little bit about outcomes and just having more community evaluation of the social service programs, and I think that this is a wonderful idea, so. That's it.
Well, and I respect that. I would, I'm kind of concerned with that, though. And I know I'm one that doesn't like change, so keep that in mind. I'm gonna be honest with you. But I don't know what kind of participation we've had in the CAC. Brad, have we had full participation from everybody?
No, we have not.
No, we have not, and that's what concerns me. So, my thing is, I don't know if we want to appoint another committee and each council member put somebody on that committee to do this, but that's my only thing. I have 11 NIAs, and I know the CAC reports that come back to those NIAs, and there's not very good participation. So what I don't want to happen is, I don't want the people that are there to stronghold what they really, really want, and then somebody get cut out. You understand where I'm coming from?
Are we gonna talk about this now or later?
No, it's just a.
Deputy Mayor, I do hear you. I actually want to make sure that everybody understands that this isn't an accepted program yet. It was a recommendation by the city manager. I thought Brad was going into it, so I made sure that he and I were on the same page.
Right.
I would be happy at this particular moment, at the end of Brad's presentation and prior to the zoo, if you wanted me to just take a minute and walk through this and then allow us to go in some discussion. But before I do so, I will say, Deputy Mayor, that one of my concerns is, I don't believe that the CAC is, as it's structured today and as it's functioning today, is the right body to do this. I really was looking, because it was an existing body that was already seated and has experience with this through the CDBG approval and recommendation process. But one of the notes that I included in there is that would be a use of the CAC would be in a temporary thing. I think it would be just as easy if everybody just named a representative to review this, but that's a discussion that y'all. So if I can just walk through this, the objective is, and this is the document that I provided to you, it's to develop an application process that's more inclusive. And it also has an opportunity to do more in-depth assessment of what are the potential values of the particular applicants, and also allow the opportunity to review past performance, especially as it pertains to somebody who's received one of these grants in the past. Did they actually perform? And I think that's the potential improvement that exists in this process of what's happening right now. It is my understanding that generally, if you receive funds in the past, there's a pretty good chance that you're going to receive funds in the future. It might be moderated a little bit based on the dollars available. But if you weren't a participant in the previous program, there does not appear to be a very straightforward avenue to getting consideration and to get included. So that's the purpose of this. The background information is that the 2014 budget currently includes an allocation of general fund grants, primarily for youth and social services that benefit Topeka residents. The recommendation for 2014 is $479,000, which is consistent with what it was in 2013. The total amount of money, about $141,000 worth of those recommendations come through the HND office, and the remainder, $338,000, come from the mayor's office. The recommended process, and this is the city manager recommending it, and certainly it doesn't make it so, that you would approve in the budgeting process, that you would approve a total amount of money to be included for general fund grants, but there's no specific determination in the budget process for what those actual groups would be and what the actual disbursement amounts would be. That there is, and I wrote, the CAC or an alternative citizen group would implement a simple process that, number one, accepts applications. Number two, they review and score those applications based on specific priorities that are developed by the council. These are the 5 things we want you to consider when you're doing this. And that review process and recommendation process would be based on organizational experience, the potential benefit derived from the investment, and most importantly, past performance, especially as pertains to previous grants. That group, whether it's a CAC or an alternative group that's developed for this specific process, an ad hoc group, maybe this year, they make recommendations to council towards the end of the summer, early fall, prior to, consistent with the CDBG timeframes. And then that recommendation we brought forward to you, you would then make the final decision. You can accept it in toto, you can reject it in toto, you can make minor adjustments as you want to. The final decision is totally up to you, but it has the benefit of citizen input and a more in-depth review process, as opposed to what could happen is in about 2 weeks, we're gonna have everybody up here on the last day and we're gonna be doing some horse trading and some issues. So I just really am remaining committed to the idea of the most informed decision process that allows us to make good decisions. So that is what is being recommended today. We take your direction.
Mr. Mayor?
Yeah, thank you. And I want to just, in adding one point, there is, in all fairness, there are other appointees to the CAC. Actually, the mayor, through the council, makes 3 appointments, so in addition to the NIE members. And also, with we talk about the youth and family grants. There are 3 entities in it that you are not, that are separate type. One is Keep America Beautiful. One is Downtown Topeka. We have grants for their redevelopment of buildings, and then the Community Resources Council. So, and we always go through this. They really aren't. They're not. It's fish and fowl type. But one thing to keep in mind in this type of arrangement in this discussion. So.
Well, I appreciate that, and I know there's going to be some other new entities. I mean, when you look at the NOTO district and how well they've done, I mean, and rightly so, I want it fair across the board and not, you know, if they want to step forward, and I don't know, they may not want to step forward and ask for money, but if they do, I mean, I just want it fair across the board, and I just, that's my concern. So we might have to cut some of that. Karen?
Well, as somebody who's been through that process for 30-some years as a social service agency director and seen how the process worked with different advisory or recommendation boards, got a lot of experience with that. Also, I've been looking to settle this process down with the city as well, and now that we have a long-term city manager and we're getting some things in place, this is probably a good time. When you look at the social services, a couple of key things. One is that the city funding has been used traditionally for core operating funds. We went through a period once where it got opened up quite a bit and there was this idea to get new blood in and so on, but what happened was lots of very small grants were made to emerging groups that had a good idea. It was very appealing, but many of them weren't well spent and they went away in short order, and what it did was cut into those core operating funds for long-term tested agencies who were not only using those funds and demonstrating how they could, but they were also using those funds in and of themselves, and the reliance on those funds to leverage other core funds for their programs. And I'm real sensitive to us changing that system, especially since United Way has changed and core funds aren't so much coming through United Way right now. It's gotten more trendy, if you will, targeting just to a certain part of town instead of everywhere in town and things like that. And I'm just real sensitive from the services perspective that we be very thoughtful if we consider any change in terms of how we give out funding. And in part then switching back to who advises us on that funding. They need real clear direction from us as a council as to what our priorities are and what we want to fund, and this council has not done that. And it needs some time before we would give instructions to anyone. Back to how that process goes with that team as well as for the agencies, you really, because it's a pretty high level budget process from those nonprofits. They get funding from other sources, some of which are stable and reliable and some of which are not. We have found, even though as a director I wasn't that crazy about it, people who were very experienced at a high level with United Way. I mean, for a long time, the director of the Community Resources Council and a senior rep for United Way staff and a third person, I can't remember who, were the team that advised the city. That happened for years and years. And as a director, I kind of didn't like it because they knew what questions to ask in terms of what our other sources were and how the programs were going. But on the other hand, they were good questions, and they were questions that somebody from a neighborhood or a council person by council person appointment of somebody they knew would not necessarily know enough about the needs and the service network in the community and how those agencies run to even ask those questions, or to be able to then sit back and give us the best possible recommendations that we need. So I worry on both of those. I'm okay with changing a system. My sense has been that we needed as a council to address that in February some year when we were not in budget and well in advance of those nonprofits agency cycles. I mean, it's just sudden death for us to make a major change on those agencies in August when they're talking about January 1 funding. So I think we owe it, and February of this year, because it's not an election year for any of us either, we can make those decisions in February and then do the budget based on those priorities, might be a good cycle if we want to change how we do it. Last but not least, we have a kind of a two-part tier of the social service agencies that we do fund, and Deputy Mayor Ortiz mentioned that not all in that bucket right now are even social services. Some of them, and they are typically the ones that over the years advance to having their own line items rather than being in the social service fund pool. And that's because they really were providing services that the city otherwise would provide itself. And so they were core services as the city saw it. the social services in those funds are generally doing things like daycare or emergency services funds and so on. And those kinds of things are not necessarily what a city would do. So deciding whether we want to fund that sort of thing and then how much, and letting knowledgeable folks advise us on how to distribute it, that there are two levels. And so for us to decide overall in policy what we want to fund, whether we want to fund only things that would be city services otherwise, but it's contractual instead of having our own staff, or whether we want to fund those things that otherwise would be city services and after-school programs, charity, emergency aid money. Those are major policy decisions that we need to make first. So again, I encourage us to look at that process, make those policy and priority decisions, and maybe set up a new system, but not right today. I think we need more time on it. So if we wanted to leave the money the same, for instance, this year, which we've done the last couple of years because we always end up in this crunch, we wouldn't need to do too much. If we want to make cuts even, we would probably end up overriding anything anybody advised us anyway. So.
Thank you, Karen. And with that being said, is there any more questions for Brad? Any questions or concerns? Because I'm looking at the time, and I really want to get my zoo guy in here.
Quick questions, I think. You mentioned the revolving loan fund, but I don't see it reflected in financial. Are there other funds, or could those come forward to us so we know?
The revolving loan fund and the use of those funds would be an amendment to our 2013 action plan, so that would not be reflected in the 2014 budget.
Okay, well, it was just money out there, and generally we've been reflecting those
Right.
funds. And also, you all administer the SORT program, which is a substantial amount of money, and the staff that's listed here is administering that program, correct?
Correct.
And is there some overlap with the money that you have out of CDBG that is being spent on those SORT neighborhoods as well?
Well, a big portion of the SORT funding comes from CDBG, home, and then as part of the capital improvement program process that you guys will go through, we'll ask you to allocate a certain amount for neighborhood infrastructure related to SORT.
I bring that up because I think it would be helpful. People were looking at these numbers that you were talking about, how many rehabs and so on, but what percentage of those are locked into the two SORT neighborhoods versus available citywide for
Right.
any of this might be a clarification. So related to that, generally, we vote on your consolidated action plan at the same time as we vote on the budget. Have we gotten that yet?
We have just finished the draft of that.
Okay.
And the public comment period will be starting here fairly quickly. As part of the agenda review process, or the agenda process, we'll be providing the copies of the action plan to this body, yes.
Okay, well, particularly for the new folks, that will give a lot more detail about
Definitely.
these programs that are in here. And we actually, though we rarely do anything with it, we will vote on that as well, and this is a lot of detail. Thank you.
How will this affect the application process as now? Because applications were due for 2014, May 1st, 2013, correct? Yes.
Deputy Mayor and Councilmember Campos, the thought in the recommendation is that we would reopen it, because our understanding is that the application process that has already closed was kind of limited just to the existing people. There was no effort to reach out. So that was the issue.
Okay. Any other questions or concerns? Not trying to rush anybody. Thank you. Appreciate that. I think for now, if we could all agree to put the grant approval process maybe on our next agenda. And I think if council members, while Brendan's coming to the front, please, I think if we, I kind of agree with Karen, maybe we need to go through a process and it not be budget time. So if we can kind of decide, if we all agree on that, to kind of do it the way that we've been doing it, and then maybe look at it in the months to come. I think if everybody would look at that, and maybe if we can get that on the agenda for discussion, city manager? Would that be appropriate?
Deputy Mayor, yes.
Okay, but if we could really think about that, because to change that process, I just think would be detrimental. And now we have my favorite guy.
Council, it
Jim
is,
is offended. You messed up.
I apologize. My favorite guy, city manager. You can't always be number one. Come on.
I'm okay with that.
I have more hairier friends than you do. And a very new special one that someday we'll talk about. Thank you for allowing me to be here. And I realize the time, I'm going to try to be brief, leave time for questions. In the zoo section, there is a colored pie chart.
And do we have a new insert on that? Yes. Starting with 132?
134.
134, okay. New inserts, everybody. Thank you.
I am going to try to center my presentation largely around this pie chart to help you understand the financial operation of the zoo. The zoo does operate out of the general fund. Our expenses, or our expense budget, has been relatively the same since 2011. And sometimes what that means to me is the money that we actually have to spend has been relatively the same since 2011. If you look at this pie chart, the obvious thing that jumps out is that wages and benefits comprise 53% of our expense budget. That supports 24 full-time equivalent employees. And then we use contract labor to support seasonal influxes that we previously used temporary staff for. Our contractual budget is the next biggest wedge of the pie, the green. It takes up 34% of our budget. To kind of give you a feel for how that is spent, what we refer to as internal services equals about $400,000, or half of that contractual sum. That is our IT fees, our insurance, our fleet services, and our share of public works. Our utilities are another $321,000 of that. So between those two pieces, that is the majority of the contractual budget that the zoo spends. Marketing and advertising, we spend about $15,000 on annually. Our commodity budget, the purple, that $256,000. Of that amount, $118,000 is budgeted on animal food, $22,000 roughly on supplies to care for animals, including straw. And then $59,000 is spent on food for people through our concession operation. The small wedge, the 3% referring to capital outlay, $59,600 of that amount is, in 2014, is the second of 3 payments for a boiler system that was originally funded as a bonded project. And then later, it was realized that the city actually had the cash reserves to pay for that over 3 years at a much lower overall cost to the city. The remainder of our capital outlay that is budgeted in 2014 is $9,500 that is scheduled to bring animals into the zoo. Now, the irony that is there is that most of the animals that we bring in, the animal itself is actually free. It's the cost of getting it here that is always the expensive part. For 2014, like other departments, we were also challenged with how would we meet the needs of a 5% budget reduction in our department. 5% is roughly equal to $121,000. The other challenge that we deal with in 2014 is we expect to have about 4% less to spend compared to this year by just cost of business going up, largely with utilities, insurance, and our portion going back to the Retirement Reserve Fund. Our challenge as we look at this is that our goal is to share our product and our vision with more and more people. We believe that we truly have the impact of being able to change human behavior here locally that has global effects. And our goal is to be successful as we carry that to not only people of Topeka, to Northeast Kansas, but wherever we can draw people from. Our goal is to be successful. The challenge is that in 2010, we had essentially the same size zoo, the same size animal collection, the same number of buildings. So our costs associated with that portion are relatively the same as they are 2013 and as they will be in 2014. In 2010, though, we had an annual attendance of 111,000 people. Last year, we had an annual attendance of 194,000 people. You wind up buying a lot more hot dogs and toilet paper and other things that go along with a greater increase of guests. During the third quarter last year, as we were evaluating what is going well and what is not, we identified 4 areas that we thought needed improvement or that could give us another boost if we could improve them. The areas were additional marketing, reception, better volunteer management, and better focus on guest service. What started to develop was a plan that the mayor heard yesterday. Hopefully all of you will get the chance to hear this in detail over the next couple of weeks. I'm going to be very brief about it today. But what started to develop was a plan that would essentially outsource our guest services or several of our guest service functions to Friends of the Zoo, a nonprofit support group of the zoo committed to seeing the zoo succeed. Our original hope with that was that it would free up budget authority that we could address some of our other challenges or some of our other growth opportunities with. As we have moved through this year and started looking at the 2014 budget year, what we started to realize is that that now becomes an opportunity for us to reduce operational costs to meet that 5% goal. The other expectation with reaching a savings of $121,000 from 13 to 14 would probably be the cost of 2 FTE positions in that process. And with that, I will stand or sit for questions.
Elaine?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Great ideas, and hopefully it will come to fruition. Do you know what it would take to have the zoo self-funded and be on its own, kind of like, I mean, the library is its own entity, of course it's county, but.
No, we don't, but we've started to explore that. Earlier this year, in a conversation with the city manager, Friends of the Zoo actually contracted with a consultant to work with the zoo and the city to explore what those options are. We know that every zoo is different. We know that every community is different. We know that the answer is probably not to be a copy of somebody else, but there may be a better alternative. So we have begun that process, but it has just only begun.
Are there a lot of zoos that are city-county zoos, like libraries, or not?
The trend today, well, to answer your question, about 28% of accredited zoos are still county or city owned and operated. There is one federally operated zoo, that's the National Zoo. There are 2 state-operated zoos. But at this point in our history, over 70% of the accredited zoos have entered into some sort of formal public-private partnership with their governing authority.
Okay, thank you.
And I think Brendan's done a great job at bringing our zoo along to get us someday. I think you took the Kansas City Zoo, is that correct? And you got them privatized eventually?
I was there during the time that it did privatize.
So I think I said that to say he's got experience, so I know that's in the back of his head, but, you know, when you see other zoos copying ours, that says something, because we haven't always had that, and I know Salina now has the penguins, you know, and, you know, Brendan's thinking outside the box. He's really doing a lot of stuff. He's broken the record of attendance, I think it was like in September of last year, or October, somewhere in there.
We're starting to see numbers that was like in the heyday,
Right.
and that's where we want to get back to.
So.
Could I ask one more question?
And, just a second, and the one thing that I really, really like, and the one thing that I think we could do more of, again, is marketing. We had the Sunflower State Games today.
Yes.
You know, I have, a family that travels, and, they, go to Kansas City to play these ball tournaments, and when they get their packet, they get packets of the zoo, or free this, or you know, one kid free, or whatever. And if we could do more of that, like with all the people that are coming for the Sunflower States, if we can do more of that. And I've talked to Brendan on several occasions on that. I think it'll be beneficial to us, you know, whether it's, you know, if we can get, because I know when I went to the St. Louis Zoo, there was, if I took my tickets, I could get a free meal at Denny's, and that's what we did. Just more of that, just to push people around.
And we are going to be seeing, or you will be seeing more and more of that. We're starting to partner more with the Lodging Association. We actually had wanted to be open late last night for no other reason than the Lodging Association was willing to promote that in the hotels, because that's where a lot of people are staying this weekend.
Right.
So those conversations at least are occurring. August 27th is going to be a unique day at the zoo. It is Lawrence Day at the zoo.
Wow.
Where what we are trying to do is let anybody from Lawrence, if they can prove that they're from Lawrence, experience our zoo for half price. Our hope is that they will do at least one other thing while they're here in Topeka. The Children's Discovery Center is now offering that same value, so we're starting to see a Gage Park focus to it. You know, we want people to come here, and we're trying to reach out to make that happen.
Right. Elaine?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. So are you working with, like, Visit Topeka and putting it in all the conference packets? I know they put together a packet for all conferences that come to town.
Yes. Now, yeah, we work with Visit Topeka, the Chamber. Again, some of these are new initiatives, and we have gotten much more now into a better pattern that, you know, the second weekend in June is an event. The second weekend, whatever this weekend is, I think it's the second weekend of July. So that from year to year, those are organizations that we can partner with to get the word out, can start to see consistency.
And like the Brew at the Zoo tonight?
Yes.
You've been advertising that through mainly flyers, or?
Brew at the Zoo, we have been advertising it mainly through 2 sponsors of that event, WIBW TV and the Cumulus Radio Network
Right.
here in Topeka.
And it's on your website, it's on the zoo website.
Yes, it is.
Do we have any, Councilman Harmon?
Thank you. Brendan, you have in your org chart, you've got a horticulturist position.
Yes.
Has any thought been given to Palladium Forestry take on that responsibility?
I don't know if, no, to answer your question honestly.
I don't know.
Should it be given? We can definitely at least have that
Yeah, there-
conversation.
Yeah, there may be some overlap that perhaps if that position was assumed by forestry, there might be some savings, possibly.
It's, I think overall, the attractiveness of our zoo grounds kind of held this zoo together for a few years.
I agree. I agree.
And we have one horticulturist. This is actually the first summer that he's had some additional part-time help. He does an incredible job. If he was to leave city employment, I don't know that one person could replace him. So there may be some short and long-term benefits from having that conversation.
I just wanted to throw it out there. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions or concerns, Mr. Mayor?
Thank you. How many members or households are there in the Friends of the Zoo?
There are just over 4,800 households.
48. And also, Brendan, have we looked at more volunteers with the, I guess, the guest services? Have we ever looked at that option as well? I know it's hectic getting in there, but, we never had that problem before because people weren't going to the zoo, and now people are going, and so it takes a while to get in.
Yes, we, specifically with guest services in several roles, we are trying to enhance the number of volunteers that we use. From simple things like greeting to more formally trained volunteers to add another experience behind it.
Okay. Our kids need something to do this summer. That'd be awesome.
Yes, they do.
Especially a 6-year-old that I have. Karen?
I got lost in your numbers earlier. You were talking about how many zoos had public partners, and I had 28% that I thought were local government, then 1 federal, 1 state, and then it was over 70% public-private.
The number that is usually thrown out is 72% of accredited zoos now operate within a formal public-private partnership.
Okay, so the 28% that you were talking about first were self-sufficient?
The 28% that I was referring to are still operated and governed by some form of government, whether it's city, state.
Okay,
or
so
federal.
they all are then?
100%,
That adds up to 100%.
okay, I'm sorry. I don't know, off the top of my head, I know of, out of 224 accredited zoos, 7 or 8 that are truly private, self-sustaining zoos. One is Disney's Animal Kingdom. One is SeaWorld Adventure Parks. There's another one in Phoenix, Mickey
Yeah.
Olson's Place.
World Wildlife Zoo.
These are places that have either been, that are either very commercialized, very expensive to go to, or in the case of the one that the city manager and I were just talking about, started small with a solid business model, without community expectations, so to speak. All the other zoos that were started as a point of culture by a governmental agency, the Kansas City Zoo, for example, as it was referenced, it is still owned by the city of Kansas City, Missouri. It's operated by a third party. That's the type of that's the difference that I was trying to make. About 70% of zoos are operated by a third party about 28% are still operated by a governmental agency like us, or like you.
Gotcha, so there's a different number that would say how many are self-supporting and how many
Right.
are subsidized.
Yes, very few are self-supporting,
Okay,
but there are a handful.
thank you.
Are there any other questions or concerns for, my last question to you would be, can you, introduce the young lady?
I'm sorry. Anissa Barnett is the zoo's office specialist.
You're not cutting her position, are you?
Our goal would be to not have to answer that question.
City Manager, do you have anything else for us?
Deputy Mayor, no, we're concluded.
Okay, all right. If nothing else, this concludes. Thank you.
Thank you.
I finished that in my